Hello there everybody, my name is Andy. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Hopefully this week it's not as echoey as it was last week. It might still be a little bit. I'm still waiting for my curtains. They're going to be put up in the next couple of days. So videos from next week should be a little bit less echoey because the more soft furnishings you have in a room, the less echo. You get the idea. There's going to be a rug, there's going to be all sorts of stuff that are coming in the next week. So hopefully less echo. But of course, I usually talk about sex education on this channel, and that continues this week. I'm going to be talking about the difference between sex and sexuality, and indeed separating the two. Now recently here in the UK, you might have noticed there's been some protests about things like LGBTQ plus education in primary schools. It has come from various faith communities, but not exclusively. There's been plenty of small c conservative groups of people who are against this as well. And I believe it comes from a misconception about what sexuality is. Now, I consider myself to be straight. Now, that means that I am accepted by most of society without any question. Nobody thinks that I'm going to indoctrinate anybody's kids, because in the eyes of most people, being straight doesn't mean that you automatically want to have sex with everybody. Now, in my experience, that's just not true. Sorry, I shall rephrase that. Hang on. In my experience, it makes no difference. It doesn't matter what your sexuality is. Your wanting to have sex is the same as everybody else. Your sexuality has got nothing to do with your libido. But in the eyes of these parents that are protesting about LGBTQ plus education, particularly in primary schools, it seems to me that they're coming from a place where they think that teaching about same-sex relationships is almost akin to teaching them and showing them sex acts between two people of the same gender, two men, two women, or indeed any variation of this, bisexual people, pansexual people. And of course, it isn't, is it? Particularly in primary schools, we're talking about relationships. So we're talking about in the context of friends. Yes, we're talking about people who are a couple, but when we're teaching primary school kids about this, we're talking about, why does Jimmy have two mums? Why does Sarah have two dads? Why does Billy over there have a mum and two dads and an auntie Sue? What's that got to do with sex? Nothing. It's got to do with parenting. It's got to do with people in a relationship. And it teaches these kids two things. Firstly, that these things exist. So when you come across them, you shouldn't hate them. You think that might be obvious, and it also teaches them that there are lots of different experiences, not just your own life experience. That's specifically about teaching LGBTQ plus relationships to primary school kids, but we see this in society as well. So it generally comes up when it's the first time this happens on whatever medium. So the first gay kiss on telly, the first same-sex couple in a particular dancing show, maybe one on ice, for example. You get the same old traditionalists saying, oh, well, it shouldn't be like that. It's never been like that before. Why should we have to have this on TV? Why should we have to see this? You know, I don't want my family or my children to see this because I don't think it's traditional. And they use the word traditional a lot, by the way. Traditional just means your own worldview, not things have never been like that before. Believe me, they have been like that before. You just didn't pay any attention to it. Maybe you chose to not pay attention to it. Maybe, and let's be a bit more generous about this, shall we, that because it was never in the media before, it didn't appear on your radar, it didn't appear in your worldview. But again, it's not even about the relationship. It's because people, these particular people, are equating same-sex relationships to the sex act itself. Now, it's perfectly possible to be in a same-sex relationship and not have sex at all. I mean, there's the old adage about married people not having sex after they've maybe had a baby or two, and they're like, yeah, no more sex. No, not at all. Well, it's equally possible in same-sex relationships. Alternatively, somebody is gay or lesbian or bisexual and they just can't get any, like the rest of us, right? How many straight people do you know that are not getting any? Well, it's the same for gay and lesbians and bisexual and pansexual people. Some people are asexual and don't want it at all. We've actually got instances in the establishment where sexuality itself is not discriminated against, but the sex act is. One is where I believe in the Church of England. I don't quote me on that, but certainly in a lot of faith denominations, that gay priests can be ordained, but they can't be practicing. They're not allowed to actually have the gay sex, right? They can only be gay. So they can say, well, we're not discriminating against gay people. We just think that these people should be celibate. It's like, what's the difference? So you are discriminating against gay people, just in a very specific way. Same goes for giving blood, right? So it used to be the case that gay men who have sex with men, I should say, were banned from giving blood for life. Now, I believe that changed in about 2012, where only practicing gay men were banned from giving blood, and up to 12 months after their last sexual encounter. So anybody who was a man who had sex with another man couldn't give blood for 12 months after the last sexual encounter, which for some people, of course, amounts to a lifetime ban. Now, that has also been reduced recently, but it hasn't been lifted completely. There is no real evidence that men who have sex with men are at any higher risk than straight people having sex. I mean, I don't mean anal sex. I don't mean risky forms of sex. I mean sex. And whilst you should never use a blood donation as a means of testing for HIV or any other sexually transmitted disease, they do test for these things before they give the blood to the hospitals. Every single donation is tested for HIV and for syphilis and other blood-borne diseases. So as long as you're not risky in other ways which have nothing to do with your sexuality, such as you have been shooting up drugs and whatnot, that makes sense, right? That's got nothing to do with your sexuality. That's just risky. So as long as that is the case, why shouldn't you be able to give blood? I can't really think of any other reason other than a traditional view of what gay men, and in this case, HIV, because of sexuality and equating the sexuality with sex itself. To be clear, before 2012, if you had one time had anal sex as a man with another man, then you were banned for life, even though that's ridiculous. You could have every single test in the world and it wouldn't have made any difference to your ability to give blood until they lifted that ban in 2012. So I think it's really important to separate sex and sexuality. We'll go back to the example of teaching kids at primary school this. It's simple, really. I understand that, it's not necessarily appropriate to teach 9-10-year-olds about sex and sex acts, right? They're 9 and 10 years old. You could argue that you should teach them about the actual sex acts at 9 and 10 years old, but I understand why some people think it's highly inappropriate. So age-appropriate sex education would include relationships, talking about why people love each other. And it doesn't matter what gender you are, what ethnicity, what sexuality you are, it doesn't matter. It's about relationships and about love. And I don't understand how anybody could be upset about that. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, why not give it a thumbs up? You can do that just down below. Do leave a comment telling me what you think about separating sex and sexuality. I make videos every single week, so why don't you subscribe? You can do that just by clicking the little red box below. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.